Amen. Thank you so much for the band, for all of your faithful leadership in service and in rehearsing all during the week. Thank you to all our volunteers who've set up, not only in 9:30 in the Wesley Hall, but also upstairs in the Gathering Cafe. Everyone in the cafe, I know volume can kind of go up and down. If you ever need to raise the volume, there's a little control panel in the back. Karma knows how to do it. Hey, Karma. So glad you're all here with us today. It's Christmas, y'all. It's Christmas. We made it. We withheld until after Thanksgiving. We resisted. And if you didn't, bless your heart. You do you, right? I'm so thankful that we're here in this time. We just moved into a new neighborhood, and apparently our neighborhood has a tradition where someone ding-dong ditches you but leaves a stocking, and then you have like 24 hours to fill the stocking and ding-dong ditch somebody else. I don't know. That's on my to-do list now. I hope that all of you are experiencing wonderful surprises in your life everywhere we go. Of course, Christmas and life in the church is all intertwined and all mixed up. And of course, how we think about it is so incredibly important. And I'm going to talk a lot about how we think about Christmas, of course, over the course of this month, because how we think about Christmas, how we observe Christmas, what we have going on in our hearts during this time has a huge impact on our lives, not just during this portion of the year, but the entire year. And I have to be honest, there's a way to kind of do it wrong, right? Or there's a way to do it not so great. And a cautionary tale for that is me, all right? A cautionary tale for that is experiences I've had in my own life. So I grew up, close by. I also grew up in Tarrant County. And I had a family that, of course, observed Christmas, and we weren't super involved and plugged in the church, so we had more of that cultural Christmas thing going on, but it was really pretty, and it was really nice, and we had family over, and there were the parties, and there was the decorations, and there were the big meals, and there were all those things, but I had to be honest, I was a kid, right? I was, a little kid or a teenager, and you can say a holiday is about family, and about friends, and about decorations, and about get-togethers, and all that kind of stuff, but y'all, at the end of the day, there was a Nintendo in it, right? And so you can say a day is about whatever you want, but if at the end of the day there's a Nintendo, that day is about Nintendo, right? Like that's what really resonated in my heart and in my life. And so even though I knew all the right things to say and I knew what we're doing and I'm a teenager and I'm a college kid even and I know what it's about, at the end of the day, right, I've got a Santa-shaped Jesus and this is all I'm really looking for. Is my wish list, right? It's all coming down to what happens on Christmas morning. And even though people were saying all the right things, even though people were saying around me all the things about it's about family and about love and about all this kind of stuff, at the end of the day, right, it was about the biggest gift I got all year, which is truly when it happened. And so what happened after that was that kind of grew old and it kind of grew stale and it grew unfulfilling in the way that it does in so many of our lives. Materialism does not generate grace and peace and hope and joy in anyone's life. And so even in my early 20s, I started to feel that really becoming empty. And so I really kind of realized how crass and materialistic my own Christmas heart was. And so I tried to step away from it, but there wasn't really anything in its place, right? It was just, some get-togethers and some garland and, getting around with the family at the hearth and watching Die Hard, the world's greatest Christmas movie, right? That's all it was. And so I was wanting to figure out, something more. And I remember specifically, almost 10 years ago, I was having this desire in my heart to really have something more special go on, right? To really have a Christmas that was more deeply connected to what God was doing in the world and in me. And so I prayed about it. And I just kind of had this prayer, right? Like literally, like God, this obviously means more to everyone else than it does to me. And I was praying, and I had a pretty good Christmas season, and the result of all those prayers, I felt more in the Spirit, and I felt more kind of happy and fulfilled, and good things were going on in my life. But Christmas morning, Christmas evening, the actual day of Christmas, I had a chance to actually be a part of a miracle. I had a chance to participate in a miracle, and it changed everything about my understanding of Christmas and a lot of things about my life. So that's what we're going to be talking about over the course of today. So the sermon series that we're doing is called Christmas is Not Your Birthday, right? Christmas is not your birthday. And it's one of those things where when you have a sweater like this, and then on Saturday you're walking around your house and you're going like, no, wait, I can actually wear that to church. Y'all, this is not a sweater. This is my liturgical vestments for today. These are my vestments. It's very traditional. A lot of people are familiar with the Happy Birthday Boy sweater. Christmas is not your birthday, and what I want to point out is that the way that our world tells us to celebrate Christmas is to celebrate it as a birthday, right? Particularly as your birthday, right? Think of what your birthday usually has. I'll tell you what my birthday usually has. It usually has a bunch of parties and get-togethers, right? My birthday usually has really good food and really good drinks and people that I don't spend a whole lot of time with coming together. We decorate the house for my birthday, right? And then my birthday culminates with presents for me, right? And 25 Hallmark movies made in celebration of my birthday. That's what it's like every year. No? Okay? Not funny? The cafe's laughing. Right? So like that's what my birthday is like. And typically what we try to do is celebrate Christmas like it's our birthday. Right? Like it's our birthday. And so one of the things you're not going to hear over the course of this sermon series, you're not going to be hearing me talking down to anybody. You're not going to hear a whole bunch of, y'all, stop doing X, stop doing Y, stop doing Z. I'm not going to tell you to do all these kind of things. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you into something more. All right, I'm going to invite you into something a little bit more meaningful, I think. I'm going to invite you into something a lot more powerful. I'm going to invite you to participate and to think, maybe to talk to your kids, maybe to talk to your family members, maybe to talk to the people in your life, your spouses, significant others, anyone. I'm going to invite you into some ways of being that might make Christmas a little bit more meaningful in your life and a lot more like what God is doing during this season. Right? And that spirit of invitation is really important to think about, right? There's a lot of theology talking about invitation because that is exactly what God is doing in Jesus. Right? The entire Jesus story, right? The entire story of Jesus' life and all of his teachings, his workings, his miracles, his crucifixion, his resurrection, his ongoing testimony and work through the church is all about God inviting us, right? God presenting a better way to us, God trying to include us in what God is doing, right? Showing us how much better it is, showing us how much richer it is, showing us how much more true it is to what God created everything to be than what we've let ourselves settle for, right? So that's what we're going to be doing over the course of this entire talk, is inviting you into letting Christmas be something so much more than just your birthday, and instead letting Christmas be something that has a lot more to do with what God is doing in the world through Jesus. So that's what we're going to be doing. I have a little slide we're going to be going through every week. I'm going to be giving you some particular things that I want you to do to help you follow this. This is something you can actually be talking to your kids about, right? Something you can actually be bringing up in conversation, reflecting on in your own life. And we've got one for this week, right? That's where that line comes up. This is what I need you to do. If you're going to start looking at Christmas as Jesus' birthday, right, and that doesn't just mean like a one-day event, right, just the culmination on the calendar, that if we're going to actually kind of live into this season as drawing us closer into what God is doing in Jesus, and the first thing it's going to involve us is us looking for miracles, right, looking for miracles. And it's weird to think about miracles as being something you need to look for. Right? I mean, typically our understanding of a miracle is something that just drops out of the sky and lands on our heads. A miracle is something that just, bursts out of creation that can't possibly be ignored, that can't possibly be overlooked. But we see over and over again in the Bible and in the lives of the church that miracles are usually something you actually have to be on the lookout for. And our text today is going to help us understand that. I want to turn to the Gospel of Luke. There's 4 Gospels in the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Luke is the third. We're going to be in chapter 4. A whole bunch of our Christmas narrative comes from the Gospel of Luke. Pretty much everything about the Christmas story that's covered in the Charlie Brown Christmas, that's all Luke's version of the Christmas story, but we're actually not in the Christmas story today. What I want to share from you today is a story that happens very early on in Jesus' ministry. But this is after he's a grown man. This is after he's gone out and experienced the temptation. This is actually when he's starting to preach and to teach and to tell people who he is, and more importantly, what God is doing in the world through him. Right? This is one of the earliest stories. Now, there's been a miracle that's already happened so far in this story, but yet Jesus has now gone somewhere very unusual. Jesus has gone somewhere very bold. Jesus has gone back to his hometown, right? Jesus is going back to his hometown. The people that know him, right? The people that have known him since he was a little boy. The people that know his mama and the people that know his daddy and the people that don't have a gospel story being told to them over and over again about who he is and where he's from, right? All they understand him to be is the likely illegitimate child of Mary and Joseph, right, located in their little backwater, nowhere town in the middle of the chosen land, right? And so this is who they understand Jesus to be. And he walks up to their synagogue, right? He walks to the central place of their worship and their connection, and he begins to speak to them, these people who know him and who have seen him grow up. And this is what he says. We're going to be in Luke chapter 4. We're going to read verses 14 through 30. At the end, I'm going to say God speaks to us through the reading of Scripture, and you're going to say out loud, "Thanks be to God." Hear these words. Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit to Galilee, and news about him spread throughout the whole countryside. He taught in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. So he's traveling all around the world. He's traveling all around the area, and everyone else who sees him is praising him, is being thankful for him. Jesus went to Nazareth, where he had been raised. On the Sabbath, he went to the synagogue as he normally did and stood up to read. The synagogue assistant gave him the scroll from the prophet Isaiah. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, and then he reads from the book of Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to preach good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind, to liberate the oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. He finished, he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the synagogue assistant, and sat down. Every eye in the synagogue was fixed on him. He began to explain to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled, just as you heard it." Everyone was raving about Jesus. So impressed were they by the gracious words flowing from his lips. They said, "This is Joseph's son, isn't it?" Then Jesus said to them, "Undoubtedly you will quote this, saying to me, 'Doctor, heal yourself. Do here in your hometown what we've heard you did in Capernaum.'" That is, do all the miracle stuff that you've been doing everywhere else. Do it right here for us. He said, "I assure you that no prophet is welcome in the prophet's hometown. And I can assure you that there were many widows in Israel during Elijah's time, when it didn't rain for 3.5 years, and there was a great food shortage in the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them, but to only a widow in the city of Zarephath in the region of Sidon," meaning not to the people that he was from, but to distant people, other people, the rest of the world. There were also many persons with skin diseases in Israel during the time of the prophet Elisha, but none of them were cleansed. Instead, Naaman the Syrian was cleansed, someone else from somewhere else. When they heard this, everyone in the synagogue was filled with anger. They rose up and ran him out of town. They led him to the crest of the hill on which their town had been built, so that they could throw him, and went on his way. God speaks to us through the reading of Scripture. Thanks be to God. There's so much in that text to think about and to reflect on. One, I can tell you as a preacher, a pretty novice preacher, right? But I can tell you, if you're going to read a piece of Scripture and then you're going to close the Bible and say, "I got to tell you guys, all of that is talking about me," that's a strong maneuver. You do have to be Jesus to pull that off, right? But he's teaching, right? And he's explaining about all that God is going to be doing through him. Right? All that God is going to be doing through him, all this liberation, all of this good news, all of this healing. It's the first time he said anything like this to these people, right? About what God is going to be up to through him. And they all say, "That's amazing. We can't wait for you to serve us and do all these wonderful things for us," right? And then he points out, do you realize that in these other moments, right, in the long history of what God's been up to, people have wanted nothing more but for God to be there for them, to serve them, to do their bidding, to relieve their ills. But don't you realize over and over again, God's been up to and about this business of spreading God's grace to the outsiders, to the people that we don't think are worthy, to the people that we don't think belong or are good enough? Do you realize over and over again that's what God has been doing? And he points to some Old Testament prophets with those very same stories and says, "I'm going to be doing that very same thing," right? I'm not going to be doing exactly what you expect. All of the fullness of God in me is not simply here to do your bidding, right? To relieve all of your concerns and ills. It's not just here for you, it's for the entire world, particularly for the people that you don't think belong, particularly for the people that you don't think deserve it, particularly for the people that you do not believe have earned it. And how do they respond to this, right? They chase him to the edge of town and toward a cliff and try to kill him. One of the things that we're going to see over and over and over again throughout the stories of Jesus' life, right? Something that you'll learn as you read the Bible, something that you'll learn as you go to Bible studies, as you participate in worship, is that over and over and over again, the people who are looking for God's Messiah, right? The people who are looking for the good news of God's presence, the people who are looking for evidence of God's work in the world, look Jesus right in the face and they miss it because they're not looking for the right thing, right? They're looking him right in the face and they miss it. So One of the things that's hard for us to recognize is that God works miracles. And yet the miracles over and over again that God's work is not exactly what we're looking for. By the way, I taught a Bible study on Wednesday nights. That's kind of going on a hiatus now for a while. But I was teaching in the Gospel of John, and Jesus is working a whole bunch of miracles in the Gospel of John. And so I was describing the miracles that Jesus was working, and then everyone was laughing at me in the class, which is a unique teacher experience to me that I get a whole lot. And apparently, when I say miracles, that's not how you pronounce miracles. Apparently, there's another way to pronounce miracles, and I'm saying, like, Jesus does miracles, and they would all laugh, and they would say, you're saying it wrong, and then and I'll say, how do you say it? And they say miracles, and I say, I'm saying miracles. Anyway, if you're one of the people that is opposed to this pronunciation of miracles, this is going to be a tough week. So I just want to say that right now. God's grace and peace to you. I'm doing my best. We're looking for miracles. Miracles. Is that it? That sounds awful. Miracles. It sounds terrible. It's not right. It's miracles. It's nuclear. Just get over yourself. God does miracles, right? Over and over and over again, God does miracles, right? Stop it. Y'all need to break y'all up is the problem. So God does the M word over and over and over again in lives, right? And yet what we want to see is like a comet coming from the sky. Sometimes that happens, right? What we want to see is someone who has stage 4 cancer and the doctor says they're never going to live, and then they do another scan and it's all gone. That does happen sometimes too, right? Over and over and over again, those kind of things happen. What happens even more, right? What happens much, much, much more, what happens unfathomably more is that God works miracles through ordinary people, right? And when the people of Israel were looking for this Messiah, right, what they were looking for was someone with a perfect lineage. And what they were looking for was someone with a perfect background. And what they were looking for was someone with a perfect pedigree and a perfect military acumen and all of the right things politically to come and give them what they want in the way that they wanted it. And what they were missing was what God was doing through ordinary people and through poor people and through a forgotten community and through a seemingly ordinary man, right? Over and over and over again, what people miss is that God works miracles through ordinary people. If we're making the transition, right, from Christmas being like it's your birthday, where it's simply about presents, and where it's simply about parties, and where it's simply about family and about get-togethers, and all of those things are wonderful, by the way. I hope your life overflows with each and every one of those things, right? I hope your life overflows with parties, and with presents, and with family, and with get-together, and with all of those things. But if you want to move from Christmas just being about your birthday to being a little bit about what God's doing in Jesus' birthday, then the first step for you is to look for miracles. What looking for miracles looks like for some of you is for praying for them in your own life, right? Just openly acknowledging the things that seem to be hopeless and openly acknowledging the themes that seem to be stuck, right? The relationships that seem to be just permanently broken, right? Or the doors that seem to be irrevocably shut, right? The bridges that seem to be completely and totally burned. Right? For some of you, it's about looking in your life and your own need for a miracle. But one of the things that you need to understand is that if and when that miracle is answered, and it may not be, right? But if and when that prayer for a miracle is answered, it is much more likely that that answer will come to you through a seemingly normal person, right? Than in any other way. Some of you, in making your season a little bit more closely connected to what God is doing in Jesus, need to look for miracles in your own life. But the vast majority of us, myself included, the vast majority of us need to be going through this season praying and going through this season asking and going through this season looking for a way in which we can not just do charity or we can not just be kind, but a way in which we can be a miracle for somebody else. So I shared a story of me probably at my lowest almost a decade ago when it came to just kind of really understanding what Christmas was about or even really resonating it. My kind of engagement in the whole season had pulled away from the materialistic, but there wasn't much left behind it. And so I was just praying, God, I want this to mean to me what it seems to mean to so many other people, right? And I had a good season, and I had a good time, and I was working at another church at the time, not in a clergy position, but in a staff position. And that church, like our church, has everything going on in the course of the Christmas season, right? Culminating with hours and hours and hours of worship on Christmas Eve. And so, of course, I'm there all the time, and it's incredible worship. But I'm also working, right? Let's call a spade a spade. And so it's really busy and hectic. And so I get home, and this is before my son is born. So it's just my wife and I, and we have Christmas, and it's a beautiful, wonderful Christmas. And then I can't remember what year it is, but what I remember happening is that bad weather was coming. Bad weather was forecast to arrive in the evening of Christmas leading into the next coming days. And there's a really good possibility that we're going to be like iced in. Because, we don't get snow, we get ice, and then our solution is sand for some reason. Because, what would make this better? Mud. Anyone who's lived up north has real questions, myself included. But sand is our biggest. Anyway, I'm anticipating not being able to go to the grocery store. And so my wife and I have been so busy leading up to this season, there's no food in the house. And all of a sudden I'm realizing I need to go get food. And it's Christmas Day, and we might be snowed in for 3 days. I can't remember if it happened or not, but we need to go get food. And so I need to go to the grocery store. And guess what's not open on Christmas Day, right? Grocery stores. And so I'm driving around, and I can't find a grocery store that's open. And I find a little groceria in Haltom City that's open. So I'm like, God provides. And so I go in, and I'm doing all my shopping, and I'm checking out. I don't know what time of day it is, but it's dark. So anytime after 3:30 in the afternoon, I guess. And I'm checking out in the line, and there's a middle-aged woman and a teenage girl with her, I assume it's her daughter, and they're paying with, and this happens a lot in the part of town that I live in, they're paying with their EBT card, what you might call food stamps, right? That's what they're paying with. And so there's a problem that's kind of happening with the transaction, right? So it's just it's kind of snapping me out of my my grocery store coma that I'm in, and realizing there's a problem here. And if you've ever been in a situation where this is happening, it's usually kind of a quiet conversation between the cashier and the person because they don't want to embarrass them. And I'm just kind of looking and I'm paying attention, and they have just a mammoth collection of groceries, but it's obviously to feed a family for many days amount of groceries. And, anytime you give them 3 loaves of white bread at a time, right? They're trying to feed a whole bunch of people. And I'm overhearing what's happening, and the cashier is so frustrated and upset is because what's happened is the food stamp EBT system is down, right? So it's not it's just, nothing wrong with the card, nothing wrong with their account, right? It's their whole systems is down. And she just can't get it to work. And there's no one to call because it's Christmas. And there's no one to fix it because it's Christmas. And you're just seeing the face of this woman and this teenage girl. And I'm sure this is already a difficult moment for them, buying all these groceries in this way anyway. And they're being told, I'm sorry, there's nothing for you. And there's nothing we can do. And the cashier is frustrated and upset. And they're frustrated and upset. And they're just walking out the door with nothing, right? And so here I've been, right, praying for weeks. God, let Christmas mean something to me. God, let this season mean something to me. God, let something grow in me. Let Christmas be more about, in my life, what it seems to be like for everybody else. And here I am, and it's the dark, and it's the cold, and it's Christmas. And I see 2 people. I see a family, right, in desperate need, and the solution is something that I can provide, right? I've been in a lot of situations in my life where I wasn't in this position to just step up and buy a week's worth of food for a family, but I was in that position in that day, right? So I did what every single one of you in the room would have done, right? Bang, done. Merry Christmas. And we just talked, right? We're just talking, and they're so appreciative, and they're so thankful, and they're being super generous. Sometimes you don't know how people are going to react in that situation, if they want to just kind of move on, and I would have been fine with that, but they wanted to talk and be thankful. And what I had to tell them was guys, I've been praying for weeks to get to have something special happen for Christmas to mean something for me, right? And I got this chance, right? And some of you have been to the gathering before. I've told this story before. The reason I'm telling it is because it's not only formative in my understanding of what Christmas is, it's formative to my whole life, right? That was the first time ever I spent weeks and weeks praying to get to see a miracle, right? I spent weeks and weeks and weeks praying for God to use me. I spent weeks and weeks and weeks praying for something to happen. And on the cold, in the dark, in Haltom City, at a grocery store, I got a chance to be part of someone else's miracle. So in your family, right, with your kids or with your extended relatives, do what you do, right? Have the parties, have the presents, have the fun, have the get-togethers. And when you're praying, right, when you're praying in Christmas, when you're praying through this season, add to your list, God, I know that you are working miracles around us. God, I know that you are breaking into the world around us. God, I know this is the season where whatever barrier that exists between heaven and earth seems to be exceptionally thin right now. I know there are people that are in desperate need of a miracle, and I have eyes to see. God, I am looking for it. God, I don't know what it looks like. God, I don't know what it takes, but I am here and I am looking, because if you aren't, you will miss it. If you aren't, you will miss it. But if you are, right? If you have eyes to see, if you have ears to hear, if you are paying attention, God is working miracles all around us, and God is inviting you to be a part of it. So here's what I ask. In your family, in this season, whatever's coming through, all of the busyness and all of the goodness and all of the wonderfulness of the season, because it is each and every one of those things, add to it, God, this is Jesus' birthday, and you are inviting us into a new way of everything. I am looking for miracles. I am paying attention, and you just tell me what you see. Please pray with me. Great and loving God, this is not a normal time of the year. This is not a normal season. This is not just another place on our calendars. God, this is the Christmas season, the season where you look at a cold world, a dark world, a lonely world, a world caught up in its own greed, its own anger, and its own mistrust, and God, you give us Jesus. In the midst of all of the fear, you give us Jesus. In the midst of all of the believing that it is through strength and power that we become strong, you give us Jesus. God, in the midst of us thinking that there's no more to the world than what we can see, you give us Jesus. God, you are working miracles all around us. Give us eyes to see, give us ears to hear, and give us the chance to be a part of it too. God, we come here expecting that you will give us that opportunity. So in all that we do, God, we simply lift up your name and pray together the words that you taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.